started a life of service that was so extraordinary, that was so long and so consistent, that was so revered. Over the next 60 years, he lived a long life, that he would go on to be remembered in what's called a renown of sanctity. After he died in 1963, people continued to invoke his name and say prayers to him, to such an extent that he was remembered by the Archbishop of Reggio Calabria, who was a student of his in seminary during the 1940s. He was remembered to such a degree that he was nominated for sainthood to a new young pope in 1979, John Paul II, who was all about making saints, as I also look. Now, let me go back a little bit. My grandfather is pursuing the American dream. He now has a job working for Rosa Brands, Italian food products, which is just like Progresso, and it's based in the Northeast in the Delaware Valley with olive oil and tomato sauce and all that kind of stuff. It was his in-laws' family. He was very successful at being a salesman, selling at all the Italian-American grocery stores in South Jersey. He was pursuing opportunity and destiny, and he could have that in the United States. He never looked back. He never told his children about his family here. He brought his brother over, he brought his parents over, his sister wouldn't come. Meanwhile, Gaetano was back dealing with the worst of it. Because the people that emigrated to this country were not the worst off. They were not the people that were so destituted that they needed to leave. They couldn't get out. They were stuck. So my grandfather fled to pursue New World prosperity, and Gaetano stayed behind to ease Old World misery. In 1908, there was an earthquake in Calabria and Sicily, just across the Strait of Messina, that was the most devastating earthquake that Western Europe had ever seen at any point and until now, similar to what we've seen in China. Tens of thousands of people were killed. Buildings collapsed within a 100-mile radius. It's the 100th anniversary of that earthquake now. He had to deal with that. He had a mountain parish at the time. World War I started after that, producing orphans by the thousands. So he opened orphanages, and he opened schools. Mussolini steps up, and he decides to become a dictator. That will save Italy. That's a good idea. Let's have fascism. And suddenly, a land that's been oppressed is now being oppressed by its own government. It used to be the French, and the Bourbons, and the Spanish, and now it was Rome. And Gaetano had to deal with that too. All the way through World War II. And people that survived World War I had the great fortune of sending their children off to World War II to die in that war. And Italy bore the brunt of it again. And Gaetano was there with his mountain outreach. By this time, he had found an order of nuns, scores of them, to go into the remote mountain villages and bring people the only thing he was selling, hope and faith. He was a remarkable guy. He had no politics. He had no interest in leadership and influence. He just wanted to serve the people. He said that he saw the suffering face of Christ in every poor person he looked at, which was everybody that he looked at. And he wanted to reach out to them. In this country, my grandfather had no idea this was taking place. Because I know that if he did, he would have supported Gaetano. He would have sent money back to his churches. He would have helped him do the things that he was doing, because the Catanosos in Italy, which I've just come to meet in the last couple of years, have been doing that for years. But they didn't know. They didn't know. These families were divided, as I'm sure a lot of your families were, when the first generation came over here and didn't look back.